Okay, what's up everybody? We're back and we're going to be doing our save system today. So let me show you what we're going to be doing. So I have a simple health bar set up that I can push a button and make the health go down. We're also going to be saving some inventory items. We're going to be saving storage as well as our player location, our control rotation, so it's going to remember which way our camera's facing. And then we're going to start doing some actors. So I have doors that I can interact with here. Inside the room, I have lights. So these are going to be actors that are going to be placed in the world all the time, and we just have to recreate their state. So is the door open, closed? Is the light on, off? This can be for a lot of different things in your game. And then I'm going to cover spawning things in too. So if I just push my key press here, I can spawn in this default couch. So this will cover anything from spawning, crafting items, building, placing, anything like that. Anything that's going to have to get respawned back into the world, we're going to cover that. So I'm going to try and cover as many things as I can so that it'll pretty much cover anything that you may want to save in your game. I'm also going to cover saving the video options that we made in a previous episode. We have our video options here, but they get lost every time our widget closes because we lose our variables. I'm also going to do a little bit of menu work too. So we're going to throw an icon up on this screen when we save, as well as disable these buttons so we can't save and quit really quick. And in our main menu, we're going to do some stuff in here too, because if we don't have a save game, then we're not going to want to continue or delete. So we're going to disable those buttons unless we have something going. So we are going to need a continue button, a delete save button, and once we're in our game, we're going to have a save game button too. So that's how everything's going to be working from. If you want to set yours up to be an autosave, you can do that. If you don't want the delete save, you don't have to have that. I'll show you at the end where you can find the file and delete it manually if you don't want a save game, if you want to delete that save game for whatever reason. We are going to have a button that we can save from, and we're going to have a button that we can load from, as well as start a new game, which you should have anyway. And just a quick rundown of how this is going to be working. I'm going to be making a custom game instance for this. And I'm going to keep the game instance very small, and it's going to be clean, and I'm only going to be using it for the save game stuff. I've tried a few ways, and this is the way that I like the best. I'm going to be casting from the actors that we're saving to the game instance to get access to our save game class to write our data to, so that when we write that to a slot, everything in our save game class is going to get written to the slot. So if you followed a bunch of tutorials online and maybe you have a bunch of stuff in your game instance that you're casting to, then maybe this isn't the right save game for you, because I am going to be casting from the actors to the save game. So the way that I do this, my game instance stays very small. It's only a couple megabytes. And the game instance is always loaded whenever our game is loaded. So there's no extra overhead in memory doing that. The only time that it's going to run into a problem is if you're using your game instance to cast to a bunch of other classes for whatever reason. You can use interfaces instead of casting, but you're going to need an interface call for every actor that you have that you want to save. And I tried doing that originally, and then it just started getting extremely messy. If you have 100 or 200 actors that you're saving, that can get very messy in your game instance with all those interface calls and stuff like that, trying to keep track of that. So that's why I've settled on doing it this way, keeping the game instance nice and clean and small, and then casting from your actors to the instance to save game. So I made a save game folder in here, and then inside that I have a structures folder. And what we're going to be doing is, for most of our actors, we're going to be making a structure, and that structure is going to hold all the variables for that actor that we need to save. So for now, we're going to make a blueprint class, and we're going to look for save game. And we're going to pick that save game class, and I'm just going to call mine save game BP. And then we're going to make another blueprint class. This is going to be of game instance, and I'm just going to name that my custom GI. And then we're going to need a blueprint interface for this. So I'm going to make a blueprint interface, call that BPI underscore save game. And we're going to need an actor that's going to be responsible for spawning anything back into our game that needs to be in there. So we're going to make another blueprint actor, and I'm going to call that load save actors BP. And then really quick before I forget, we're going to want to do two things. So I'm going to put that load save actors BP into the world. We're not going to use that yet, but I don't want to forget and not have that in there. And we're going to set our game instance to our new game instance. So if you already have one that you made and you're using a custom one, then just leave it there. But I'm going to go into maps and modes, go down to game instance and pick the custom GI that I just made. So now we're using that custom game instance. So I'm going to go into the blueprint interfaces first, and we're going to make some functions in here. So I'm going to make one called save game data. We're going to make another one called load game data. I'm going to make another one called delete game data. I'm going to make one called send out save. And the last one is going to be load from save. And we don't need any inputs or outputs here. We're going to compile and save that. And we can close our interfaces. And then I'm going to go into our game instance and we're going to set that up. So our game instance is going to be writing our game to slot or loading it from slot. So we need to get this onto our save game interface. So I'm going to look for BPI save game, and then our functions come in. So we're going to need load game data, save game data, and delete game data. And then we need a begin play in here, but you can't use begin play in game instance. So what we have is event init, which is initialize. So we're going to get that in here. And then we want our event init to call our load game data. So we can just come up here, get our load game data, and plug that in here. So on our load game data now, first thing we're going to do is do a check and see, does save game exist? And then we're going to promote this slot name to a variable here. And then before I forget, we're going to compile, save, and we want to name that slot. If we don't name that, it's not going to write to our drive. So I'm just going to call that slot 1. So if save game exists, we're going to come off of true. And I'm going to make a variable called should load, and that's going to be a Boolean. And we're going to set that to be true. And we need to put a branch in here too. So does save game exist? We're going to do a branch. If save game exists, we're going to set this variable to be true. After we set that, we're going to come off and do load game from slot. And you should see there's an option for async and non-async. We're going to pick the non-async because when we're loading, we don't want to do this in the background. We just want to load everything and get it done. And then I'm going to grab my slot name and we're going to plug that in. And then coming from this load game, we're going to cast to our save game BP. So we want to cast to save game BP or whatever you named your save game. And then we're going to promote that to a variable. Now after here, I'm just going to put, we might not need it, but I'm going to put a delay in and I'm going to set it for 0 seconds. If you need to give your world a little bit of time for your actors to load in before we send this call out telling them to load, then that's what we can use this for. So this will delay the call going out to your actors, giving them time to go in the world. Like I said, for right now, we don't need that, but I'm just going to put that in, set it to 0. And then we're going to come off and get actors with interface. And we want to pick our BPI save game interface. And then we're going to call our load from save. And we want to pick the one that says message. And then connect our out actors to the target so that everybody on our save game interface will get this load from save message. Now that's if we have a save game that exists. So if we don't have a save game that exists, we're going to come out and create save game object. And we're going to pick our save game that we made. Make sure you pick the right one that you made. And we're going to plug in our save game variable to it because we want to set that. So if we don't have a save game, we're going to create a save game, set our variable. If we do have a save game, we're going to set should load, and send out our load from save here. Now on our save game, we're going to just do a save game to slot, and we have async and non-async. So for me, in my case, I'm using a pause menu, which is going to save, but maybe in the future, this is going to be set up for an auto save or something like that. So I'm going to do async save, and that will allow the game to save in the background as our game's running. It won't stop everything. So like I said, right now, it doesn't make too much of a difference for me because I'm using a pause menu. So everything is going to be stopped anyway, but maybe in the future, this is set up for an autosave or something like that. So we're just going to do async save. And we're going to plug in our save game into our save game object here. And we're going to plug in our slot name too. And then from our delete, we're going to do delete game in slot, it's called. And we'll just plug in our slot name here too. And our game instance should be set up. We're going to have to do a couple quick things in here once we set up our video options, but we should be good in here for now. So I'm going to compile and save that. Now we're going to set up our buttons. So I'm going to head to my menu and we'll do our pause menu first. So I'm going to come into the pause menu and we're going to set up our save game button here. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to make the save game text. So I'm just going to come in here and we're going to look for text. I'm going to add text to the canvas panel. Call that my save text. I want to make sure that that is variable. And I'm going to throw it down here. And I'm just going to change the font and the size. Okay, so I just made it say saving. And I'm just going to put it down in the corner like that a little bit. Now, by default, I don't want to see that. So I'm going to set that to be collapsed by default. So is variable is checked. I have all my buttons in here too that I want to disable when I save. So all those buttons are inside of a vertical box. So I'm just going to select the vertical box, make sure is variable is checked so that I can just disable this whole vertical box after we save. And that'll prevent the player from quitting during save. And one thing I want to do real quick is just set up a quick animation for this saving too. So I'm going to go to Window, add animation. I'm going to pick my saving text and we're just going to name this save icon. And then we'll go in there, we'll add, I'm going to add my save text, click the plus, and I'm just going to do opacity. So we'll pick color and opacity. I'm going to go to like the 2-second mark, set that to 0. And I actually want to start it at 0. And then I'm going to go up a half a second, change it to 1. We'll go to the 1 second mark, change it to 0, go to 1.5 seconds, change it back to 1. So then what we have is it's going to start at 0 opacity. It's going to go up, down, and then fade out. So then we're done with the animation. We can head into the graph now. Now, some of the stuff with the buttons, I'm going to be disabling that. You don't have to do that. That's just optional. You don't have to make a little saving icon. You can always do that later if you want. So the main functionality we're going to need is just to call our send out save from our save button here. So if you don't want to do the button stuff that I'm going to do, you don't have to do that. But I'm going to go into my graph here. And so on event construct, I'm going to get my game instance and I'm going to cast it to my custom GI that I made. And we're going to promote that return to a variable. And that will give a reference to that game instance. We're not going to use that yet, but we will need that. So then I'm going to come down to my save button here. And I'm going to make a function in here. And we're not going to use this time, but we will use it in the next video. So I'm just going to call this clear arrays. And I'm just going to return out of it because I don't want to forget to make this. So we're just going to set this up now. So then if you don't want to do anything fancy with your buttons, you can just get your clear arrays, come off that and do get actors with interface, pick our BPI save game, and then we're going to drag out and get our send out save message. Connect your out actors to the target. So this is all we need to send out our interface call. But I want to do some stuff with the buttons and the loading indicator, so I'm going to wait on doing that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just grab my vertical box, and I want to do set enabled. And I'm going to make sure that's disabled because I want to disable that vertical box. And then I want to get that save text. And I'm not sure, we did make that collapsed. And I want to do set visibility on that because we're going to want that to be visible. And then I'm going to grab that animation we made, drag off and do play animation. And then now I'm going to plug in this stuff. So again, if you didn't want to do anything with your buttons, this is all you need. But because I want to disable my vertical box, show the saving, play the animation, I'm doing that first. Then I'm going to plug into this stuff here. And then I'm going to run a delay for 2 seconds because that's how long my animation is. And then after that, I'm just going to grab this stuff here, just the enabling vertical box and setting the text visibility. And we're going to paste that in at the end here. And now we're going to re-enable our box and make our text collapsed. So that should be our save button all set up. Make sure we're calling our interface here, which we are. So we'll save that. And then we'll jump into our start menu. So in here, I'm just going to select my, again, this is optional. This is just something I want to do. But I'm going to select my continue button and my delete save button. And by default, I want those to be disabled. So I'm going to go into the graph now. And then on our construct, I'm going to get the game instance. And I'm going to need to cast to my custom GI. And we're going to promote that to a variable. And now after that, I want to do a check and say, does save game exist? And then we'll do a branch to do our check. And we're going to plug our slot name in here too. And we can get that slot name from this set variable here. So we can just do get slot name and plug that in. So then coming off our branch here, does save game exist? So if our save game exists, we want to grab our continue button and do set enabled. And again, this is just something I'm doing. If you want to do this, you can do it. If you don't want to disable your buttons, you don't have to. And I'm going to also put my delete save button on there. So we'll connect that up too. So if we have a save game, we're enabling those buttons. By default, they're going to be disabled. But when this widget opens, it's going to check. If we have a save game, it's going to enable those buttons because I don't want to be able to push those if we don't have a save. And then I'm going to come down to where we're starting new here. So our start button. So I'm going to grab my custom GI, drag out, and we want to set should load. The variable that we made in our game instance, we're going to set that to be false here. And this is going to be for our player. So our player will know if we want to load the data or not. So when we're starting new, that's going to be for our player. Should load will be false. And then on our continue here, we're going to get our player controller, drag off, and we want to set show mouse cursor. We're also going to drag off and set input mode to game only. And I'm going to drag off and just do a set timer by function name here. And I'm going to just set this for 0.5. You don't have to do this, but this is just so if you're playing any kind of animation on the button or sound, it's not going to immediately jump into the level. It's going to give a little delay to let your animation play, let your sound play. And I'm going to make a custom event right above it and just call that load level so that this set timer will have called this. So I'm going to copy the name of that event and just paste it in here. And then that will just give me a little bit of time to play whatever animation sound, then this will fire. And then we're going to want to load our level. So I actually have that right here, load open level by name. So I'm just going to copy that, put that over here and plug it into our custom event. And then I'm going to grab my game instance reference that we have. And I'm going to call load game data. And this is the interface we made, but we're going to do the call function because that's going to be a little quicker. Since we're casting to the game instance, we have access to the functions inside of it. So we're just going to call load game data right here. And then for our delete, we're going to get our game instance again, get the reference, and we're going to do delete game data. And we want the function. This is our interface we made, but we're going to use the function, so it'll be a little bit better. So we're going to call our delete game data. And then this is something that I just have to do in my menu. So you won't have this, so I'm just going to grab my text. I just want to make my delete button unhovered. So then after I press a delete save, I want to get the continue button and I want to disable it. So I'm going to set enable, plug that in. I'm going to make sure that enabled is not checked. And I'm also going to grab the delete save button because I want to disable that too. So now everything should be set up here. So I'm going to jump in. We're going to save. We're going to jump in. Now, nothing's going to get written to the save slot right now, but if we pause it, go in and save game, our buttons get grayed out or disabled, so we can't hit anything. Our save game's on the screen and flashing, so that's good. If we go to our main menu, our continue button and our delete button are disabled because we don't have anything in our slot. So all we can do right now is start new. So we're looking good here. So now we're going to get the player saving. So we're going to go into the player BP. So I'm creating a widget that has my health bar on it, and I don't want the widget to be shown in my main menu. So I'm just doing a check. So I'm just doing a check to see if I'm in my first person map or not. And if I am, then I'm letting my begin play fire. So I just want to add a get game instance in here. And I'm going to cast to my custom GI and promote that to a variable. And then I'm going to plug in my widget. And then after my widget, I'm going to do a branch because I want to do a check. So I'm going to grab that custom GI and I want to get should load. And this is going to tell the player whether we're loading from our save or not. So I'm going to make two functions in here, and every act is pretty much going to be the same. There's going to be some exceptions, but most actors are going to have two functions we're going to make. One of them I'm going to call make save data, and the other is going to be use save data. And I just try and name these a little bit different so we don't get them confused. But the make save data is going to be getting our save stuff together. Whatever information, whatever variables we have that we want to save, we're going to be getting them together in the make save data. And then use save data is going to be, we're going to be pulling them from our save game to use in our character to set our variables from. So we're going to jump back to the graph, and this is our load. So if should load is true, then I'm going to call use save data here. And if should load is false, we're not going to be loading anything. And we want to add our save game BPI on here. So we're going to look for BPI save game. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom here because that's where it's going to put it. I'm going to look for send out save. So remember, this is the interface call that when we click on our save button from our pause menu, this is going to fire. So in the pause menu, save game, we're getting all actors with our save game and calling the send out save. So when we click save, this is going to fire. We want that to call our function make save data. So when this fires, our player is going to get whatever variables we want at this time and save it to our save game. Once it has that, we're going to get our game instance ref, and we're going to call save game data. And we're going to do the call function. And this call function is going to be what's going to write it to the slot. So if we go into our game instance, that's what we're calling right here, save game data, which is going to write it. So let's go into our make save data and we'll get that going. So inside here, we're going to get our game instance, then we're going to drag off and get save game. And now we're going to make our first structure here. So I'm going to go into the folder, our save game folder, structures folder. I'm going to right click, add a blueprint structure, and I'm going to call this player save underscore struct. And then inside of here is going to be any variables we want to save. So for me, I'm going to do a location, and that's going to be our player's transform. I want to save my health, and that's going to be a float. I want to save the control rotation. That's going to be a rotator. And I want to save my inventory, and that's going to be of the type item struct, which that's just the type of my inventory items. And I need to make that an array because I'm going to have more than one slot to save. So I'm going to make that an array. Everything else is going to be singles. And if you have anything else to save, put in whatever variables you have in your player to save. You may just want to start with some basic stuff, get that going. That way you know if your save game system is working. And then you can add whatever other variables you have. But for me, this is going to be everything that I have to save on my player. So I'm going to save that structure. And then we're going to add that to our save game now. So if I go into my save game BP, we're just going to use this save game class to store our variables. So whatever variables we have in this blueprint, that's going to get written to our save game slot. So I'm going to add a variable here called player. And then I'm going to look for that structure we just made called player save struct. And I only have one player here, so that's going to be a single. Now that I have that structure in here, I can go back to my player. I can drag off here and get player. And this is the structure that we just made. So now I can drag off that and do set members. And we can plug that in. I'm going to open that up to expose all these pins here, and we're going to return. So now we have these pins here. This is going to be in our save game. This is the structure in our save game class. So we just need to populate these. So I'm going to get actor transform, and we're going to plug that in. I'm going to get my health. We're going to plug that in. I'm going to get control rotation, plug that in, and I need my inventory items. So I'm going to grab my inventory component, drag off, get items, and we're going to plug that in. So now when we call this make save data, we're going to get our current info that we want to save and write it to the structure that's in our save game through our game instance. So when we click save, we're going to write all the player's current data to our save game and then call write in slot, basically, save game to slot. And now we're going to do the opposite for use. So we're going to go into use. We'll get our game instance ref, drag off, get save game, drag off that, get player, and then I'm going to break. So now we just have to repopulate our player with this stuff. So now we can drag off here and do a set actor transform, plug in our location. I'm going to set health after. We'll drag our health over, plug that in. Now I have a separate function that I made for updating my health widget. So I'm going to call my update health after I set my health. Otherwise I won't see the widget change. If you don't have a function that you call, that's fine. You're probably binding. If you don't have a function you call, you're probably binding in your health widget. But I'm going to set my health, call my update. And now we have to set control rotation. So in order to do that, we have to get player controller. And we can drag off and set control rotation. And this will be saving the rotation that our player's looking when we save. So we can drag out from there, set that. And we need our inventory too. So I'm going to grab my inventory component, drag off, and set items. And we'll plug that in. I'm going to return out of the function, and we're going to drag our items over. Drag our inventory items over to here. Plug that in. So we should be good. We should be putting all of our info back in. So I'm going to save. We're going to jump in and try it. So I'm going to play, and I have a button that I can press to get my health down. So I'm just going to get my health down a little bit. We're going to pick up a couple inventory items. So I got a few things in inventory. My health is down. And I'm just going to jump up here so we can make sure that the location is changing. And I'm going to save it here. So we save game. This gets grayed out. That comes on. Now I'm going to resume, and I'll just jump down here. So now when we load our game, it should start us back up there. So let's quit to our main menu. And we have a continue button now. We have a delete button now. So I'm going to go to continue, and there we go. So it loaded us on top. My health's halfway down. I've got my inventory items, and it saved the way that I was looking. So if we look off into the blue here and save game again, now this time I'm just going to quit to desktop, which will put me back into the editor. So now anytime I start my editor, it's going to load that save automatically too. So if I press play, we're looking off into the blue here. So it is remembering which direction we're facing. And now we're going to pop into the main menu here and we're going to just try start new. So if I go start new, you can see it puts me at my game start location. My health's all the way up. I don't have any inventory items because this is a new game now. Now we still have the save game in slot because we didn't overwrite it yet because we just did a start new. So if we save, it'll overwrite it. But if we go back to main and do continue, it's going to load that game that we saved. So until we save a new game, we'll still have this in our slot, or until we delete it. So let's check that out. So now if I do delete save, you can see I can no longer hit my delete save button. I can no longer continue. And I can go to start new, and that will start a new game for me. So the one other thing I just want to show in here is if you didn't do a delete save button, or if you just want to see where to find your save at. So if you open up your main project, you'll have a folder called saved in there. Inside there, you now should have a saved games folder. So if you open that up, this is where your slot's going to be. We just deleted it, so we don't have it. So now if I go back in, we'll create one. So I'll do save game. And then we'll just quit the desktop here. So now again, if we go into our game, into our save folder, into our saved games folder, now we have slot1.save. So this is going to be what gets written to our hard drive. This is going to contain everything that we're saving. So I think that's going to be it for now. So thanks for watching and see you next time.